New digital technologies are driving a step change in enterprise business transformation. At the Digital Twin Podcast, we explore the intersection of technology and business. What should your digital twin look like?
Hari and Omar here, live on Smart Cities today. What do you think about that, Hari? I mean,
Hey,
smart
Omar.
cities, what do you think about that? I mean, what does that mean? Smart city. Everyone talks about it, right?
Everything is smart, right?
Everything is smart.
Smart refrigerator, smart dishwasher, smart car, smart buildings, and smart cars. And smart cities, right?
So if
What
you
is that?
if you put smart in front
It
of
should be.
something, it becomes smarter or
It's
what?
definitely good for your reputation as a city.
Okay. So smart in the digital world is a precursor. You would say, if you want digital technologies or something to transform the way you do, put smart in front of it. And all
Who
of a
doesn't
sudden,
want to be smart?
I know what you
You
mean.
choosing to be not smart? Anybody out there?
Some people are, they want to think for themselves. They don't want machine and AI to think for them. They want to do it themselves. I want to solve the puzzle. I don't want somebody to solve the puzzle for me. We got a lot of people out there. I mean,
I'll
come
show
on.
you a few puzzles. Solve the rest of them for me, right?
I'm like, that's no fun, right? People want to play Candy Crush all day long. They want to do it. They don't want a computer to do it for them, right? But anyway, back to it. We thought this was a very interesting topic because, you know, one of the things that we keep seeing within an industrial transformation in a digital space is how we can find applications that have a lot of data, right? It seems like with digital transformation, the more data you have, the more intelligent or the more um, intuitive your ecosystem can be, right?
Yeah.
And with a smart city, it lends itself to that in many different ways, right? I mean, this is real time data of a lot of different things in a city. I mean, you could just name a few things in a city that people are involved with, how we interact with the cities, right? Traffic is a
Mhm.
very simple, low hanging fruit, right? Traffic is
Yeah.
something that, you know, I come from Houston, where it takes me 45 minutes to get in and to and from and where we go, right? And one of the reasons I live far away is because the traffic and the hustle and bustle is a little bit less, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that adds on to our overall outlook and interaction with the city, right? Whether people spend more in the city, whether they enjoy coming into the city more, whether they can get more revenues for the cities to grow,
Hmm.
uh, within their whole environments and counties. I mean, this is all being looked at in a transformative way, and a really, if you think about it, a real business case, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so
I think you asked a pretty powerful question right at the beginning, and I'm sure, most people that we know have that same question. What makes a smart city, and why should you be smart, right? I think fundamentally, you know, maybe that is to create better quality of life for its citizens, right? I think you mentioned about your commute. When you go to the city, you want to have the right things, in the appropriate time frame that you expect to have it done, whether it's going to get, whether shopping, parking, getting something done at a government office, going to shop. I mean, whatever it is, like you want to do it in an efficient manner, right? So at a very, very high level, could we say that, you know, smart city isn't about technology? It's about a an ecosystem to make the lives of the citizens and its residents, right, much better, a better quality of life, better, lifestyle. Is that accurate?
I think it's very interesting that you say quality of life and interacting with the city, because I think that is a very key component, right?
Hmm.
You start to look at the physical realities of a city, the brick and mortar, the car and driving to do something, to interact with people in a city. You know, what we're seeing today is that's all great and forward looking of a city of the future, where it requires a lot of face to face, a lot of communication with people, a lot of developing relationships, whether it's through real estate, through vehicle, all the similar technologies that have been developed 40, 50 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unfortunately, with this pandemic that we're going through,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it be more interesting to talk about a virtual smart city? How do we interact with people today in a way that's more convenient to the people, convenient to us? I mean, we have enabling technologies that are changing the way we look or think about a city, right? I mean, if you think about it, in reality, there is no reason for me to go into a metropolitan area for me anymore. I live out in the suburbs. I often ask myself, why do I need to go in when everything I need or want or I interact with is not in the city? You know,
Why do you go?
I go.
Have you?
It's a that now that's a very philosophical question that you ask, because I think that's important, because I think deep down in each one of us, we yearn the human interaction, right? Where does that human interaction take place? Sporting events,
Mm-hmm.
concerts, things that are located in a highly dense area, you know, whether it's great restaurants, great entertainment, amusement. How do you make that experience a little bit more exciting for your residents and your citizens to be able to interact with the city, right?
But you may be also going there for better health care, right?
That's very
That's a
interesting.
necessity.
That's true.
It's not just entertainment,
So we might have to go in for certain things. You're right. You know,
right?
but you know, now that you mentioned the
Could be a
necessity,
job.
it could
It's
be
a
a.
necessity.
It's that's another point, right? But then you start asking yourself, you know, these cities have to bring people back in. They got to make it easier, convenient, because we grow up in a world where we want the next best convenience, right? We want the next best piece of technology or make my life easier, right? You know, and how does the city interact with people that are yearning for those types of things? And does it
Yeah.
matter? Does it matter?
So I think I also look at it from an essentials perspective, right?
Ah,
I mean, I do think, I think, we're so far taking the angle of how do you make somebody's life better in terms of quality of life, right? But you can also define that in terms of how do you reduce crime? Is there a technology approach to either solving crime much more efficiently, thereby preventing that, or put technology to use to prevent crime from happening, right? You hear about ring cameras solving neighborhood crimes, right? Now, we talked about privacy and all that, and I know that's still a big deal, but in general, is there a play for technology to prevent crimes? And that's not directly a better, experience driving in and having a meal at a restaurant. It does, improve your life, right? Quality of life. Another example could be, let's say, in terms of emissions, from cars or buildings that are operating inefficiently. Really, kind of leading us to the conversation around sustainability goals.
wow. This is this
I
is
mean,
this is really serious here. What you just opened up a very interesting segue here into, you know, how we look at a city and how we as humans put ourselves in an environment that we want to be in, right?
exactly.
Whether
Yep.
it's safety, air quality, people, or I mean, imagine if you had all that information feeding to say, hey, you shouldn't take that Uber because four people that were in that Uber seem to be under the weather, have high temps, and you
Hmm.
probably shouldn't take it, right? You should probably not go into that building because over the past 3 days, we've had cases of whatever. Obviously, you run into privacy issues and how do you really make this more of an environment where you're more informed, but making
Yep.
better decisions. But what does that do? That may
Hmm.
change the behavior of the environmental
Absolutely.
issues, about business owners, about um, infrastructure changes, about how people interact with the cities or even want to get inside this ecosystem. I mean, that could
If
change.
you give information readily available and accessible to a regular citizen that's living or visiting the city, it's amazing what actions that can really drive, right? Even look at what COVID has brought us. We still don't have a technology solution to, let's say, for example, tracking, tracking and tracing who is sick and where they have been, and who they've interacted with. There are countries today that I know very well where I have either family or friends that do a manual way of tracking and tracing to the point that they know exactly how many people are infected, where they're infected, where they have been, and they're quarantined, and who interacts with them while they're in quarantine. All of that is pretty much tracked, traced, recorded, and readily available, right? And so, even today, from a public health perspective, we don't really have a solution to address a calamity like that, right? A public health risk situation generated by a virus that is, we feel helpless about, right? We just can't prevent it. We don't seem to be able to stop it, cure it, right? We just have to deal with it. So what is the technology solution to it? How do we implement that? And how do you make that part of a smart city or a smart urban environment? I don't know. I mean, is that a possibility?
You know, these are very exciting things. I think the technology is there, right? I think we could both acknowledge technology is there, but we really lie into this very tightrope of privacy and how we
Of course.
share data across everything, right? And it's a balance. In some countries, it's much easier to say, "Hey, this is how it's going to go." In other countries, we have a very diverse set of thought, which provides very unique views and freedoms to people that
Yeah.
they would love to keep. And unfortunately, we have this constant tug of war about liberty versus security and safety, and we keep fighting this
Of
battle.
course.
And it's only going to get much more. Uh, there's going to be more clarity and more definition about this as we move forward because it's obvious. It's obvious
Mhm.
that this is the tightrope. It's
Yeah.
we have a lot of
There's definitely a balance.
Fortune 500 companies that are playing with this every single day. It's the thin line that we're dealing with, and we have to be very cognizant of that and strike that balance.
Do we trust public institutions more than private institutions? Because, in the topic of smart cities, the interesting shift here is, compared to all the topics that we've talked about before, the one change that I see is this is mostly not, if you exclude public or I'm sorry, smart buildings, which could be dominated by the private industry, right? But most smart cities that we're talking about, most applications, owners of those digital transformation efforts, would be government, right? Are these initiatives moving forward effectively using the tax dollars wisely, right? Or is it just an experimentation without a clear goal or a path in mind? Just looking at technology, we talk about flashing bulb, flashing lights, even in an enterprise where we just get too distracted by technology and chase after it without really knowing how to apply it and what problems you're solving with it, right? So is first of all the fact that it's actually owned and operated by public enterprises versus private, and the fact that it's using tax dollars, right? How does that play into this? What's your thoughts?
This really, you just opened up a very unique viewpoint that just came to me. You know, it's almost, I almost want to think about this as a very unique thing. You know, you have city limits, county limits, right? I look at these as kind of the entry and the exit points, right? Almost like a website. You go into a website and they said you accept the permission to monitor yourself, and very similar type of process or behavior moving into these cities. It's like, hey, you're gonna enjoy the smart city, you know, amenities that we're gonna give you if you accept X. Give up a little bit so that you can get some. And maybe this is where that delicate balance goes, right? Similar to how we navigate web pages and we go into different environments and social media and even our cell phone contracts and all our apps that we do, we sign a contract for that you know, some sense of interesting value that we would want to give up a little bit of data and privacy for, right? So I see that balance kind of being exercised in that realm, whether it's a private establishment that you walk into, whether it's a private entity of a city, whether it's a public entity of a city, right? All of this I see kind of playing in this ecosystem, which is still evolving today as we speak. I see that those different, you know, zones, you're going into these zones and you might be getting it. Hey, you're walking different owners of each of these different spots and zones for a little bit of, you know, extra amenity or you know, things that you might enjoy within that zone versus a little bit of, you know, data or privacy gathering that may be shared in return, right?
And they're sharing data as well. You know, for example, Uber is sharing data with the cities to help manage traffic congestion.
That's what I'm saying. So it's a very unique play, and I think what we have to do is, some people will say follow the money, and I think that's a good point. But you got to follow the critical data, follow the valuable data that people are buying, and I think that's where you'll start to understand the behaviors of one private, you know, governmental behaviors, as well as, you know, how they have that handshake with personal and private data of the actual citizen. So I think those areas are going to be very interesting. I think they're already being touched on today. They're being explored in the virtual world, and we're seeing it now in social media. So that's only going to overlay or the behaviors of those permissions will be overlaid in some more of the realities of what we face into the cities and how we interact. And that's my opinion on how we're going to start to, you know, eventually interact with the cities or the zones or whatever we want to call them. So
from a security point, though, I think you hit on this, but neither public enterprises nor public enterprises have been able to prove that they can secure the data they have.
That's true.
Now, while we're making significant inroads into having a better security, better encryption technologies, better cybersecurity, technologies, and better, you know, beyond encryption, better, you know, better technology to watch and monitor these things, we still seem to be losing data. And some of the names are some of the best and the brightest in both the private and public entities, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, well, that's not really the topic today, right? Back to, you know, having an efficient, you know, responsive and a sustainable city, you know, or so-called smart city, right? What do you? I mean, do you have any names of cities you want to throw up just to see if some of them have hit our radar, you know, and what do you think they have done possibly that may have merit, you know, some attention?
Well, I think you're gonna have to look at cities that, one, you know, have budget and they have an appetite of the demographics are really wanting some of these things, right? I mean, so you look at very highly dense populated areas that have a smaller footprint that can actually enhance and maximize these technologies in different ways, right? I think those areas will see the most incremental gain quickly, and have a lot more data, right? You're more condensed, you have more data, you can do a lot with it. But, you know, at some point you have to justify why you're doing what you're doing, right? And we talked about this in previous segments, whether it's a tangible or an intangible benefit, how we'd actually, you know, monetize or actually put value to this. And I think it comes back to that fundamental question on who's buying data and how much are they willing to pay for this, right? And if cities can gather a lot of data and sell this data, and in a way that a lot of people will be willing to buy it, very similar to some of the big giants like Google or the Facebooks of the world, then you have a new.
Is that really the goal, though? Selling data? Is that your their revenue mechanism?
Well, so there's a couple of ways. Why would you invest in infrastructure to do this, right?
So the end goal or objective could be much more community driven, right? Better safety, more efficient, let's say, waste management, water management, things like that, energy management. But sure, the data is a byproduct and could generate value or could return you some revenue, right, by selling that. I hope that's not really the
well, I'd say that's
cities,
some of the back end that might be some of the initial driving forces. But you're right. I think if we're willing to pay a little bit more into our society to be a little bit safer, to be a little bit cleaner, maybe that's something that some officials locally or even at a higher level can pitch.
How do you calculate the value generated for those initiatives?
If
right?
people don't want to pay more for their property taxes, what makes you think they're going to want to pay more for a traffic light that gives them 2 extra minutes, right? I mean, so that's what you got to start thinking about, right?
Exactly.
This is what we're talking about, right? So,
And how do you prove, right? I mean, yes, again, the same challenges in an enterprise kind of plays out. What exactly caused a drop in crime?
Yeah.
Could it be technology? Could it be something else? Could it be more cops that you put on, on staff, or maybe other improvements that you made, to the police force in the city? I mean, what exactly drove, let's say, any year-over-year improvement in crime rates, right? Could you attribute something like that to digital transformation effort? And how would you?
You made a very interesting thought that came to my mind. With have you ever heard of the app called Waze?
Yeah.
When I take long road trips, my wife is very strong about
Owned by
this.
Google.
Oh, there you go, right? So, it's very interesting the way that the reason why she uses that is because it alerts her when she knows that a police might be up there trying to catch somebody speeding.
She's a speedster.
We just, maybe she likes to get there quicker, right? But she uses that religiously to be able to, share data across a platform to give insights.
She enjoys sharing that data, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I just found a cop.
But she'll also say it. She'll validate whether it is or not. But you know what? Those are some of the things that are already, data that's out there that may or may not be public, private, whatever, but for some reason it's there, right?
Well, Waze knows how many potholes there are in the city than the city itself.
Can you imagine that data that's already being collected?
Yeah.
Voluntary. It's voluntary, So it's quite fascinating, right? So that the way of a smart city doesn't necessarily have to be driven from the governmental behaviors or initiatives. It can be done by tech giants like Google or ways to automatically give yourself
That's true.
a smarter
I
city.
think the whole smart car revolution in itself is an example of that, what you just said. It was driven by private enterprises, but the beneficiaries of that is going to be smart cities, right? And they're going to have the appropriate technology deployed to ensure that it can talk to the smart cars as well, right? To assist and augment their traffic management systems.
Oh, absolutely. I think we start getting into the realms of data and assets and different pieces of interacting with the city, right? Whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a person, whether it's a bike, whether it's a pedestrian, like you're walking and, vehicles know people are walking, right? I mean, you stop at a traffic light, maybe you're paying attention to your phone, but you stop a little bit too further than the crosswalk, right?
Yep.
The vehicle might know that, and the person might know that faster than you will, the operator, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, this is where you start to envision what makes sense in a city, and at the end of the day, society will change for that, right? And just like
Yep.
we've evolved with technology over time, whether it's in a virtual environment, within our own private environment, it'll eventually come in the most public domains that we think of. So,
Using data and technology to make better decisions, right? This is what it's all about. And it's exactly what's going to happen in the smart cities and the smartest of the smarts. Right?
absolutely. Well, with
So
that, Hari, I'd like to thank all of our listeners out there for giving us feedback on what's been going on within this period of time with the pandemic. It's been a little tough for a lot of people out there, but I think it's been a trying time, but also been a pretty interesting advanced time for some of these technologies. And I think within the few months and years to come, we're going to start to see the acceleration of things that we probably, only talked about, in previous episodes to actually becoming more of a reality faster than a lot of people think. So that's our Smart Cities segment on that. If you have any questions, you can reach us out at the digitaltwinpodcast.com. As well as Facebook and Twitter. With me, Omar, Hari.
comment and subscribe.
Thank you, guys.
See you later.